Okay, let's start with Kesha. Now, we should be clear that it's all allegations, but Emily, do you mind quickly summarizing what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kesha has been locked in a 10-year contract with a subsidiary of Sony Records. The subsidiary is run by a producer, Dr. Luke. He's kind of a hit maker, a Phil Spector for the modern era in many senses of that word. So he has creative control over Kesha's recording career and then also owns the publishing rights, which means if she has a problem with him, she has a problem with everything about her job. She's trying to break the contract because she feels that he, not only does she say he molested her, but she feels that he has an unsafe vibe. Like she can't actually do her work without feeling incredibly unsafe. So the judge has ruled that she cannot break the contract, ostensibly because all of this stuff should have been heavily negotiated at the beginning, 10 years ago, when Kesha was 18 years old, before she had gone platinum. So there's a lot going on in this thing, but at the end of the day, Kesha now is forced to continue to not record music because she can only record music with this company that is owned in part by Dr. Luke.
Okay, so she can't get out of her contract, and in part because she couldn't prove her allegations. Was that part of the decision?
Yeah, my understanding of how the judge's ruling went was that there's not enough that was presented in this injunction case to prove the allegations. But at the same time, the judge was really focused on the fact that the contract was solid, and at different points she'd asked for different things early in the process, and it would be difficult to just end it. Now, the interesting thing about this is that in Ottawa, someone managed to make it so that they don't have to work beside an annoying employee, an annoying coworker. So a bureaucrat in Ottawa no longer has to work beside someone who puts their feet in vinegar and walks around barefoot. But Kesha has to work with someone who allegedly raped her.
Rachel, what was your reaction to the story?
I think what's really telling about this is, throughout the history of pop, and certainly in the last decade, young women have been a tremendous force as performers in pop. So, whether it's Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, Pink, Britney Spears, Kelly Clarkson, goes on and on. But pop is also quite disposable as a form of music, and often the performers are seen as somewhat disposable as well. And there's been kind of a fetishization of guys like Dr. Luke and Max Martin, who are these songwriter-producer, super hit makers. And they're sort of seen as the sort of, exacting artistes, and the women themselves who actually bring the music to life are kind of sort of secondary in a way to their own success. And so I think what's really telling in this is what you get to see in the details of this case is just how much a young artist like Kesha gets control taken away from her. Very beginning of so and so many artists like her start out when they're teenagers, and so they are negotiating contracts as teenage nobodies up against massive companies like Sony. And so it's just ripe for exploitation. I mean, it's just you've actually created a situation in which an artist doesn't own their image, doesn't own their music, doesn't own their brand, and if they want to get out of a contract for whatever reason, it's impossible for them to leave that behind.
And interestingly, we've seen a wave of support from other young women in pop music. Demi Lovato, Lady Gaga, Grimes, Lily Allen, Ariana Grande.
But it was slow to come, though. I mean, that's the thing. Like there was this whole hashtag Free Kesha movement, but it was slow to come from a lot of other artists. And I mean, and male support has been almost non-existent. I mean, there's been a few male performers who've spoken up, but I also think that the guys like Dr. Luke have so much power in the industry that to speak out against them means that you might not get dropped from your label, but you can find that your record just actually never gets released. It doesn't really get promoted. And if you're 28, 29 in pop, like your career is basically
over anyway.
Also, Dr. Luke is only 40 years old and has almost as many songwriting credits as the Beatles. He has almost as many songwriting credits as Michael Jackson.
It's a lot of power.
It's a lot of power. He's working with all of these women that are now coming up to support Kesha.
In my experience in the music industry, there is no such thing as a standard contract. It's very much negotiated based on power. And if someone has that kind of leverage, it's difficult to overcome.
I mean, when you go from being an 18-year-old nobody and then you have super platinum, of course you want to renegotiate. But this is a very old story. I mean, I do think we should be careful and say these are just allegations. They haven't been proven, and but at the same time, this exploitation is really. I mean, it happened to Elvis, right?
Yeah.
It happened in the 30s. These exploitative. This happened with big band leaders all the time in the 50s, and it's one of the sort of hallmarks of the music industry. And I think this is just the latest form of it, really. I mean, it's
Well, and you see
I
why-
should be careful to say, too, that Dr. Luke has tweeted. He
Yes,
said, I didn't rape Kesha,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
I've never had sex with her. Yeah.
Yes, and the case itself, to Emily's point earlier, was not a criminal case about whether or not he sexually assaulted her. It was sort of a contract. It was sort of, could she break the contract? Could there be an injunction? But I think it does. I mean, more broadly, it's true that the music industry can be really exploitative, and that's why someone like Jay-Z starts something like Tidal, because he says that artists don't have enough control over their own music and over their own work in terms of publishing their music, in terms of streaming it, in terms of selling concert tickets. So you have people like Jay-Z, like Kanye, like Beyonce going to Tidal and saying, this is how I want to run my career. So there's also this I think is sort of a broader issue. However, I think in terms of a lot of the young female artists, I do think there's a particular kind of exploitation that can take place, whatever the details may be of what happened.
I mean, I think Taylor Swift giving money is actually the real Team Taylor yet again. She actually, it's not like a bunch of tweets. It's like she actually gave money to support this. I think that's really telling. I mean, of course, she has total control over her career because her father bought a piece of the record company to which she belongs, which is, the story that we all want for ourselves. But I think it's, part of me is like, 'twas ever thus. I mean, part of me is like, this is just the way this business has been from time immemorial. Producers with a lot of power exploiting young talent,
We see Tidal as a kind of reversal of that. Taylor Swift using her own funds is kind of trying to fight against that. What about on the buyer side of music? Is there anything the buying public can do about this?
I feel like it would be very unfair to ask 14-year-old girls and boys not to buy records because they don't understand, because we're trying to get them to understand the intricacies of contract law.
Yeah.
I really...
You should not buy Kesha just because she's terrible, right? Like that's just because the music is bad. Like that's why you shouldn't buy Kesha.
Well, the music is bad because Dr. Luke's her producer,
Yeah,
right?
hey, fair enough. Yeah. Boycott Dr. Luke because he's bad. Because the music is
But I think there has been a lot of fan empowerment. I mean, I do think that
absolutely.
this whole hashtag Free Kesha movement was started by fans. There's this massive, a boycott, I believe, of Sony now or of Dr. Luke Productions now by fans. So I actually think that in lots of ways that young fans have become much more politicized and savvy about the inner workings of an entertainment industry than I was as a kid.
Yeah, we definitely know more about the kind of Dr. Luke, Max Martin characters than we did before.